The Raptors have a pretty solid team going into the 2025-2026 season, but there is a glaring issue with the roster that we all know, and that is obviously in the spacing and the shooting. But if this one Raptors player really breaks out this season, who knows where it could take the team. Let's get into it. This is Amateur Sports, where it is all Raptors all the time, and we're focusing on who I think could be the biggest swing piece for the team this season, and that is Gradey Dick, because we know there is talent on the roster with the likes of Scottie Barnes, Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly. This is a team that has aspirations of making the playoffs this season, but we know there is a fundamental lack of shooting on the roster, and it seems like we're going to be going another offseason where the shooting and spacing is not going to be addressed. So it's on the individuals within the team to elevate their games. And, hopefully we get bits and pieces of that shooting coming from a lot of different sources, but it seems to me like the best shooter on the team is Gradey Dick. So if he's taking that step forward, it's going to make a world of a difference to the team and to the spacing, which is going to elevate everyone's game. That is why it is so important. We saw last season that Gradey Dick did really bring his game to a new level, especially at the start of the season. I mean, he was outstanding out the gate. He was putting himself firmly near the top of most improved player conversations. But as the season went off, that game sort of started to tail away. So we're wondering if we can get kind of not necessarily a full season of what we saw at the start of the 24-25 season, where he was averaging like 21 points per game to start the season, but somewhere closer to that, somewhere with a little bit more consistency, somewhere where there's a lot more trust in him to be on the court. I think that's what we really could see this season. And the reason I call him the wild card, the swing piece, you could also call him the X factor for the team, is again, it just unlocks so much of the Raptors offense if he's providing that lethal level of floor spacing where he's knocking down threes at a very consistent clip and a very good percentage. If he's guarded super aggressively on the perimeter, where you're bringing a defender out of what could be one that's clogging the paint to give more space to the focal points of the team, like the Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram, which I've said before. Is Gradey Dick going to be talented enough to attack off those closeouts as well? Again, it just unlocks so much of the game. Now, on top of the three-point shooting and how important that is, we do need to also factor in the defense for Gradey Dick, because maybe some of the consistency is hindered by the fact that there are just certain games where he's kind of just played off the floor, where it's just difficult to actually keep him on the floor, let him get him flow, let him get him rhythm, let him keep that consistency. It's difficult to do that sometimes when you just can't have him on the floor because he is just a negative for your team defensively. On top of the three-point shooting, which I'm sure, that's his bread and butter. That's the meat and potatoes of the Gradey Dick's game. That's what he's going to be working on in the offseason a lot, but hopefully a lot of work is being put into defense. If we can just get him, honestly, just close to being a neutral defender. But my God, if we can even get him to being a neutral defender where he's not hindering the team being out there on that end of the floor, that's going to do massive levels to his game, massive levels to his confidence, and therefore, keeping on the floor more often, that is going to do him a lot in terms of his consistency. And last season, the stats were quite good, though maybe erratic at times. Sometimes extremely good, sometimes not so good. But overall, Gradey Dick put together quite a good season. 14.4 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.8 assists. The efficiency dropped a little bit. It was at 41% shooting from the field, and it was at 35% shooting from three. Now, 35%, it was 6 3-point attempts per game. That's fine for a player in his second year, but we're getting into his third year now. At the end of this season, he's going to be eligible for a rookie contract extension. So we want to start seeing that get a little bit higher. And again, a little bit more consistent. Overall, those efficiency numbers gave him a true shooting percentage of 54.3, which is just not that good, especially for a player, who should be a very good three-point shooter. We just want to see, again, a little bit more consistency on those threes. When he's hot, he's hot. When he's not, it can be, again, a little bit more of a problem for the Raptors. But overall, this was quite good. This was good to see out of Gradey Dick, to seeing these numbers here. Especially when you look at what he did in his rookie season. In his rookie season, he spent some time in the G League, where he kind of had to refine his game a little bit, maybe adjust to the athleticism and the size of the NBA, and just get his shot down a little bit better. But in his rookie season, again, we saw a bit of a jump. This is why there were some early MIP conversations for the player. He went from 8.5 points to 14.4 points, 2.2 rebounds to 3.6 rebounds, but the efficiency did kind of drop a bit. That's something that you're not atypically going to see. I would say like it's even a little bit more typical as you're upgrading your minutes, as you're upgrading your field goal attempts per game. It's hard to scale up your attempts alongside that efficiency. Usually it is going to drop in those early stages as you are adjusting to the volume of shots that you're taking compared to previously. So I'm not as concerned about that. Overall, the efficiency numbers in terms of true shooting percentage stayed relatively the same. Went from 54.6 to 54.3. So again, it's relatively the same. There was a jump there, but now it's year 3. I think it is really time to kick on for the player. No more of this inconsistencies with the shooting. No more of being such a negative to the team defensively. We want to start seeing Gradey Dick sharpening his game up because it is going to make a massive difference to the Raptors. And if it doesn't, this is where some problems could start to lie for the player. If these things don't start to click, if he is still a liability defensively, if he doesn't really sharpen up that consistency from a three-point shooting standpoint, there are players knocking on the door of this position. Now, I feel bad for Gradey Dick in a little way because he's gone from being what would be a starter on the Raptors now being relegated to the bench. Not through much fault of his own, a little bit, which I'll touch on in just a second here. Not much fault of his own because the Raptors did acquire Brandon Ingram, and they've kept pretty much the team the same. Therefore, Brandon Ingram's going to come into the starting 5, and it just makes sense for Gradey to come out of the starting 5 to make room for Brandon Ingram. So not a lot of fault there. Where kind of some of the fault lies is that if Gradey Dick had produced a more consistent second season, I'm not saying it was a bad one. It was a fine one. It was a quite good one. Again, like I've said, 14-4 game. That's fine. That's good. There's stuff to build off of there. If it was a little bit more consistent and he provided a little bit more to the team defensively, I think it would have been a lot easier for the team to say goodbye to RJ Barrett in the offseason. We've touched on it a lot so far this offseason, the rumors surrounding RJ Barrett. And hey, if a team wanted to trade for him, he would have been gone already because the Raptors have had a strong desire to move him this offseason. In fact, even at the 2025 NBA trade deadline, they tried to move him to the New Orleans Pelicans, a deal that got Brandon Ingram. Now, the Pelicans decided to go with the expiring contract of Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk. But again, it showcased a strong desire to trade RJ Barrett. What I'm saying here is I think it would have been a lot easier for the Raptors to get that trade done and take a deal knowing that they are very comfortable with Gradey Dick being the starting shooting guard once again this season. I don't think they had that degree of comfortability. I'm not sure even if they did, they would still be able to have traded RJ Barrett because they haven't and they want to this offseason. But it is just something to consider. If he had really shown up last season with that consistency, I think he would be starting the season. But he didn't, so he isn't. And if we don't see the improvements that I'm talking about for this upcoming season, there is a logjam of players in this Raptors roster who want to take those bench minutes. Like, the Raptors don't exactly have a super top-heavy bench, but I think that there's realistically 7 or 8 guys who are not starting who feel like they should be in the 9-man rotation. Like, there's going to be basically 8 guys fighting for 4 or 5 spots coming off the bench who all feel like they're good enough to get it. Like, at some point, there's going to be some players who don't get those minutes. Like Jamison Battle, talented player, showed some good defense last season, was a very good shooter last season. Has he done enough to even make the rotation? We'll kind of have to wait and see. He's a talented player, but you've got Gradey Dick. You've got Jacoby Walter, rookie Colin Murray-Boyles. You still have Ochai Agbaji. You have Sandro Mamukelashvili coming into the team on top of what already exists like Jamal Shed, like Jamison Battle, and others. It's just a lot of players vying for these minutes. So it's very easy for someone who isn't performing up to standard to fall out of rotation. I think the biggest player that is going to be nipping on the heels of Gradey Dick is Jacoby Walter. Jacoby Walter was great pretty much all throughout Summer League. Like, really looked like he took a step up with those Summer League performances. And I know it's just Summer League, you can't read too much into it. But what I look for in Summer League, especially for second-year players like Jacoby Walter, especially second-year players who are previous first-round picks like Jacoby Walter, is, if you're playing in Summer League in your second year as a first-round pick, you need to look too good for Summer League. And for, like, the vast majority of Summer League, Jacoby Walter looked too good for Summer League and looked very, very good in those spots for the Raptors, who went on quite a run in the Summer League, might I add. So Jacoby Walter must feel like that backup shooting guard spot in his. And I think for the time being, Jacoby Walter's got to feel like one of those rotation spots is his. I think going into something like I would have said, Jacoby Walter might be on the outside looking into that 9-10 man rotation. Now I'm thinking he's in there. And now I'm thinking if he's really pushing forward, he could bully Gradey Dick out of some of these bench minutes. So, Gradey Dick, as far as this season goes, I think there's a very wide range of outcomes here. That's why he's the biggest wild card. That's why he's the biggest swing piece. Because if Gradey Dick is on, that is going to make a humongous difference to this Raptors offense. But if Gradey Dick isn't as consistent, doesn't turn it on like I'm saying, then there are players like Jacoby Walter who could be coming in to take his position. Before we end off, let's give a major shout out to all of the amazing members on this channel, especially our member in the MVP tier of Sandy Thompson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel.